How can we use games in teaching? This is a subject that I and others have been exploring for years and years now. We've been looking at all kinds of games, computer games, tabletop games, role-playing games. We've been using them, building them out, and gamifying classes in all kinds of ways. So for today's session, what I did was invited four people who, each of whom has a different take on gaming and education. Each of these teach in different ways. Each of these develop and support educational technology for other people. And what I wanted to have them do is each talk about the work they're doing, and then also to answer questions from the forum community, which always is forthcoming with all kinds of discussion. And that's what we did. I think it's a fun discussion. My video is a little bit off because I was sitting against a window which had an incredibly impressive background, the US Capitol, but it was also very bright, and so I get a little bit shadowy at times. But this is a great subject. I think the conversation is a lot of fun, and I hope you enjoy. And if you have any questions about using games in education, or if you have any experience in using games in education, please feel free to hit up the comment box. I'd love to hear from you. All right. Well, it's the top of the hour, so we should begin. Let me welcome everybody. Welcome to the Future Trends Forum. I'm delighted to see you here today. We have some great guests and one of my most beloved subjects, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation. We've been talking about gaming in education for years now. We've had different people on the forum describing different projects, and what I want to do today as we come into the holiday season here in the US is introduce a bit of playfulness and levity and introduce some. I want to bring some people who do teach with games in really creative and positive ways. These are folks whose work I've tracked for years, who I think are important players in the whole field of education and gaming. And I'm just going to bring them up one by one, just so we can get a chance to see who they are. Think of them as an informal panel for the day. They're going to toss around some ideas. They're going to share what they're working on. But above all, as we talk, I want to hear your ideas and your questions. So first of all, let me just bring up from Depauw University in Indiana, Professor Harry Brown. Hello, sir.
Hi, Brian. How you doing?
All right. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
The beard is looking very nice.
Keeping the streak alive here.
Keep it going. It's looking good. It's looking good. Harry, I have so many questions to ask you. But the first one to ask you is a standard question we ask everybody here. What are you going to be working on for the next year? What are the big ideas for you? Are you going to be teaching more about extinction or golf or about gaming?
Yeah, sorry, that profile's a bit out of date. So in the fall, I did this first year seminar on ludology, game design, and I'll talk a bit about that today. And I think I'll probably do that again, develop some of the ideas, and probably in course literature and living systems. So one of my main areas is lit in the environment too. So looking forward to all that.
Are you going to be teaching any climate fiction at all?
Yeah, I teach a lower level, intro level lit and science course, and we do a whole section on cli-fi in there. So great. And I've taught a upper level course on literary Anthropocene too, and lots of cli-fi in there. So
you got to send me your syllabi for that. I'd love to see this.
Sure, will do. Yeah, it's completely different from what we're talking about today, but it's another big interest.
Well, Harry is one of my dream professors. He taught a class on Mars and human exploration of Mars, and he just has way too much fun for me. I absolutely love him. Harry, we'll bring back to gaming in just a second, but let me bring up your colleagues right for the moment. Let's head a little further south to the Caribbean, and let's bring up our friend Ryan Downey. Hello, sir. Good afternoon.
Well, good afternoon, Brian. I've got my D20 ready. Hopefully I don't need too many saving throws today.
Well, you'll have to do a critical success roll, I think, maybe to end the session.
Ooh.
Oh, don't look at that. Don't put the camera on it. Good to see you, my friend. What are you going to be working on for the next year?
Well, here at AUC, we're a Caribbean med school. And so one of my big projects that's always at the top of my mind is finding new ways of innovative introduction to our curriculum to help our students who most need it, students who might be lacking in some of the foundations in literacy and their scientific prerequisites as they come into a medical curriculum, and really looking to find ways to ease them into a program and get them to the point where they go out in the world as successful, amazing physicians that help cure all of the ills and aches and pains of the patients around the world. So, yeah.
Ryan, are you still there?
I am still here.
Sorry, we just had a little hiccup there just for a second. But you were telling us about teaching students and some and getting them some I would think remedial skills for medicine.
Yeah, it's definitely not just about the remedial skills, but about how to incorporate those skills into being a lifelong learner. We don't want our students to just memorize the textbooks. We want them to think about it. We want them to incorporate those ideas into their ability to create new solutions and solve new problems that they might not have faced yet.
Oh, excellent. Is that all? Oh, my gosh.
And that's just before lunch.
Here, let's bring up one more guest. We have, let's see, in fact, two more guests. Let's bring up our good friend and Future Trends Forum stalwart and serial guest, Ruben Puentedura. Hello, sir.
Hey, Brian. How's it going?
Oh, very well, very well. How's everything in Western Massachusetts?
Very good, thank you. It's sunny, if a little bit chilly, but really quite nice. And, a great day to be thinking about games and trying out new ideas for games. And, it's to leap into the heart of your favorite question, what's coming up next for me? Well, I've been working a lot in integrating SAMR and AI and Black Swan aspects. I've been working on over the past few years, but I've got a bit here, a bit there. I say, okay, time to bring it all together and so on. So that's occurring in different contexts, doing a podcast on AI and education with 4 other educators, Liz Cole, Punya Mishra, Dr. Helen Compton, and Dr. Caroline Fell-Kurban. It's called AirGPT, and that's also got the idea of how do we bring together different models, different ideas together with AI in this context right now. So that's the more general profile, but specifically to games, I've been working on using AI in games for a long time, ever since years ago, before Gen AI and so on. But in the Gen AI, for instance, I started doing reacting to the past games that were based upon the use of AI. I think you've seen some of that early work and so on. I've developed that further, but I want to go beyond that. And what I've been working on of late is games for community activities. I'll talk more about this perhaps a bit later, but I'm working on a project called Almedalen AZ, which aims to bring ideas from the Almedalen process in Sweden to Arizona and to build that out as forms for community discussion, deliberation, decision-making, and so on. And I'm working on developing new types of games for that type of context. So I've been working on how to use AI, not just to develop scenario games that bring in Black Swan aspects, that bring in information, but also ways that they can help bring out the latent knowledge of participants. How do you get at what they don't say? How do you get to go beyond the loudest voice in the room? How do you get at knowledge that is crucial, essential for this type of activities, but frequently doesn't get surfaced? And I'm looking at how to surface that through games. So that's it in a nutshell for right now. The kind of thing I'm working on.
That sounds terrific. All of that sounds great. Well, here, let me rearrange the furniture here for a minute so that we're all on the same page or on the same stage. I was wondering if we could just quickly go around and if each of you could just talk about one of your gaming and education projects. Ruben, you just gave us a head start. Hang on for a second and come back to you first. But Ryan, why don't you tell us a bit more about what you're doing with gaming and education now?
Yeah, so one of the things that we see in medical education is that convincing the students that what we're teaching them not only matters, but has real world significance is almost like every time I'm up in front of the students, I get to be the game master. And for every one of those case-based problems or one of our clinical simulations, I have the most terribly balanced adventuring party in the world where everyone has picked a healer. And now I have that group of healers that's going through my dungeon. They're ordering x-rays, they're asking for labs, they're fact checking all of the data and the information that they're getting in real time through these cases in the classroom in small groups, or sometimes we're going into the sim center, and that sometimes feels a lot like a full-on LARP, a live action role play. And so a lot of what I get to do in terms of designing these experiences for them isn't that different than when I'm thinking about Saturday night when we're getting together for our campaign for our weekly adventure with everyone in the group. And so those case-based adventures, those simulations are really paralleled with the idea of those role plays, and it puts the students in their white coats feeling a little bit more like the heroes that they are, the doctors that they're going to be soon. And that's really where I come at part of this conversation with the idea of gaming as part of the education experience here.
Well, that sounds fantastic in all kinds of ways. I mean, would you describe that as gamifying your classroom, or at least gamifying your instruction?
It's definitely gamifying the instruction, because the students don't see this as a game. They see this very, very seriously. And just like you might have that one player in your party that will fact check you with some obscure statistic from a gelatinous cube from the 5e edition of the rulebook, you're going to have those students that pull out Harrison's or Bates' Manual of Medicine, and they will do the exact same thing. And so as the instructor, you really have to not only be prepared for all of those eventualities, but you have mapped out those alternative pathways. What if your patient simulation is looking for them to order an imaging MRI, and the students don't do that? Do you provide alternative pathways and other evidence for them to arrive at the conclusion, so that you have a pathway that always leads to success at the end of their adventure experience? And so as the instructor, that's really something that's critical, that the students always come away feeling like they've won the encounter.
I think you should have several other jobs besides the one you have now. And one of them would be running a medical school where you are training the professors to become better instructors. Because I think this is a fantastic way to think about teaching. Just friends, just for everybody in our discussion today, this is a very nerdy group of people, and we're probably going to be throwing around weird terms or acronyms. I'm going to try my best to make sure that we have all kinds of definitions for them as we go. But if you have any questions, or if we throw aside any other term that doesn't make sense, even if you're wondering what does Harry Brown have to do with golf, please put it in the chat. I'd be happy to explain at any point. Ryan, so when I'm talking about gamification, if for anybody who hasn't had a chance to think about this, there's a distinction between having a game in a classroom where students play a game or make a game and reflect on that experience, versus redesigning your class experience to make it game-like in different ways. That's some of the background for what I was talking about. Ryan, just one more question about this, and then I want to ask Harry a question. Do you get support from your institution in doing this? That is, as you rethought all of this, did you take advantage of professional development funding? Did you draw on anybody else doing similar work or anything like that?
Yeah, well, one of the things about this is that this is an institution-wide endeavor, that on a very small scale in my own lectures, I can present a very scaled down, turn to your neighbor and discuss this set of patient findings. But at its largest capacity, we are pulling in faculty from across all the disciplines: physiology, pharmacology, med micro, to make sure we're touching on all the relevant aspects of a case. And then we're putting this into the Sim Center, and that will involve bringing in the actor patients for the simulation. That will involve making sure that all of the simulated equipment in terms of if we're using some of our medical mannequins for simulating some of this, or if we have the screens up on with the ECGs and the electrocardiograms and the heart rates and the respiratory and the oxygen, all of that technology comes together, and it really takes a wide-reaching team to execute it at the largest scale. And so scoping this is really a big part of every plan to make sure that we're hitting an experience that fits in a 5-minute time frame in the middle of a lecture, or we're dedicating an entire day to this that involves the entire program.
Fascinating. This is. I have more questions, but I want to make sure everybody on the stage here gets to say their piece, and then I want to hear from everybody else. So please, friends, if you have questions about Ryan besides how can I sign up for his classes, and you can ask that as well. We'll come back to that. And in the chat, by the way, hello, Belinda Casey from Alberta. I hope you're staying warm and relatively dry there. Harry, tell us a bit about some of the gaming work you're doing. You're always doing interesting stuff in your small liberal arts college classes with games. What are you working on right now?
One good thing about Depauw is that I have a lot of freedom to develop new classes and new ideas. So it's I do get to free range a lot. And since I've been here, as you know, I developed teaching interest in game studies. And I'm not sure what I have to say is going to be immediately interesting to anybody outside of game studies or literary studies, but bigger picture, I tried to have students practice developing creative projects in collaboration with AI and ChatGPT. So this was in a seminar a year ago, fall 2023, on ludology, so game studies. And this part of the course, you can see. Oh, can you post the link, Brian, to the slides that? Yeah,
if you email it to me, I'll grab it right now.
Yeah, you can. So I'm not going to share any slides, but if you're interested, Brian's going to post the link and some of the details if you need to go deeper are all there. But it was an assignment to work with ChatGPT to develop interactive text games, and this comes from part of the course where we discuss the story simulation problem. How do you create games that have narrative structure, but at the same time allow for free play and unpredictability? And so we talked about D&D, we talked about interactive fiction, and then we wondered if large language models would be the next step towards text games and tech game design and gameplay. So we did this. I give you so that's the big picture, and you can see the prompt on the slides there. You asked about institutional support. I did have it. It was Depauw doesn't have TAs, but I worked with an undergraduate computer science major who was specializing in large language models, and I taught for him with him half credit independent study course. It was essentially student faculty research, and he helped me develop this assignment. So nice. He filled in the gaps with ChatGPT that I couldn't fill in, and kind of like showed me more nuts and bolts how it worked. And he really helped me engineer the assignment. So that was useful. He also helped me with assessment and helped me kind of like look for the kind of like breakthroughs or the problems with what the students did. So you can see the instructions there. The student's name was Kevin, and he wrote a whole brief game guide for the class, and everything you see there, the detailed instructions, come from my collaboration with Kevin. And we also used Jesse Schell's The Art of Game Design as kind of a textual textbook bedrock for that. So the game links, you can see them. They're a little messy, but they're really interesting. And keep in mind that we managed to do all this in half a week. So what they managed to do in a very short time kind of amazed me. But you can the students' names aren't attached to the games themselves, so feel free, everyone, to take a look at the games themselves. There are 5 of them, And one thing, I'll just kind of go through results real quick. Look at the prompt construction, because we spent a lot of time in class on prompt engineering. And this is what Kevin was a great help about, because he was actually studying how to construct an effective prompt for ChatGPT. And notice too, it wasn't, the students began to see the ChatGPT less as a tool and more as a collaborator. So when they ran into a problem, they didn't try to figure out amongst themselves what they were doing wrong. They kind of asked ChatGPT to fix the problem. And you'll see in the links, you'll see a couple different iterations of the prompts. There's a meta game where the students are asking ChatGPT to fix the design, and then there's the game itself as it plays through. So you can see it's interesting how they began to actually engage with the tool and dialogue with ChatGPT. So the big design problem was fixed versus free play, and this gets back to the story versus sim. And you can see some of the interesting solutions. The dinosaur game, which was an edgy game, ended with an obituary, which kind of like put a frame around the whole thing, and like Oregon Trail, or a game that just kind of like a final epilogue, like here's what happened in the game, which puts a kind of like narrative closure on it. One group of students actually created coherence by developing a reputation, banking, and inventory system, which Kevin didn't think was possible in ChatGPT, to help keep track of what the students were doing and establish a sequence of play that was coherent but not predetermined. And that was interesting. And then another group who wrote a horror game, Whispers in the Walls. Actually, the prompt was a description of the architecture of the house in which the story took place, and then so that was the fixed element, and the free element was how you moved around the house and what you picked up. So those were all interesting solutions by students. Problems, kind of thing that everybody talks about with ChatGPT and storytelling. It sometimes had trouble remembering what happened in the game before. So with inventory, we could tell it to use tools that we didn't have, and it would act as if we had them. So it wasn't really keeping inventory. NPC characterization was a problem. They would, one group tried to write a comedy game where it was like a dating game with political figures. And if you tried to say outrageous or funny things, the NPCs would respond inappropriately, not flatly, as if it didn't recognize the humor or the irony. So there was a problem recognizing emotional subtext or irony that it never got. And then also replayability. And you can see samples of some of my feedback on the games about how students who designed for narrative coherence often had trouble creating a game that was interesting on multiple playthroughs, and that was one of the takeaways that we discussed in the debrief. So, the assessment questions that I gave to students are also on the slides, and some of my samples of some of my responses to like really cool, unexpected things that came out, and some of the problems that we'd never really solved. So. Anybody wants to talk more about this, just email me and check out those slides.
Oh, this is tremendous, Harry. Friends, I put a link to the Google Slides link, so you can page through them, and they are very, very rich. There's a lot going on there. I did just want to read the end of the dinosaur game. Summary of your dinosaur's life. Your life as a Tyrannosaurus Rex was marked by moments of triumph and tragedy. You roamed the open plains, discovered a precious gemstone, faced off against a charging Triceratops, and found a healing plant to mend your wounds. Unfortunately, ultimately, fate intervened with the asteroid, ending your story. This is tremendous. This is so exciting, and there's already we have some comments and questions from. In fact, let's let them go at this. Ryan, why don't you ask your question that you put in about LLM agents as collaborators?
Yeah, so Harry, as you're talking about this, I get to play with ChatGPT a little bit on my own, but I love how you framed it in terms of seeing the agent that you're interacting with as a collaborator. And so that, of course, takes us into the interesting conversation areas of what are the ethics with collaborating with AI? What are some of the implications that you're thinking about in terms of the scholarship and the publication, and how do we credit those co-created ideas once we get into those spaces?
Yeah. If that's a question for me, it's we didn't really pick through the ethical dimension, but that would be a longer part of the debrief or the conversation. We were more interested in having it help us solve the practical problems of reconciling narrative coherence with free interactivity. But yeah, it's questions about intellectual property and crediting the thing. It's I'm not sure. I mean, that's a good question, I think, for the panel.
Well, what do you think, Ruben? I mean, do you have any thoughts about this?
Well, I mean, there are a whole series of questions that crop up in this context, right? And as you know, I work, for instance, not just with commercial engines, but with open source engines. So one of the sets of questions that you need to deal with then in terms of the ethics of what's going on is not only what's being sourced to feed into the engines and so on, but what's going to happen with the information that people are creating as they go through the process. So part of what's, for instance, for me is a question because of the type of work I do with community sourcing of information for community action, is to be able to guarantee that the information is only going to be used in the context in which it has been sourced. So in that context, then being able to say, well, I may use a commercial engine to construct something like the engine for the game, but that which I draw from the game is being pulled into an open source engine that is not connected to the net, does not have the issues, if you will, of being used for other purposes that participants may not have agreed to. It allows you to at least deal with one dimension of these ethical issues. But I'll be honest with you, there are huge ranges of questions that come up in this context, and
that's the kind of thing I'm glad to explore, and also to document. I'm wondering, either Harry or Ryan, have you published or otherwise shared about this besides talking about it on today's forum?
Nope, not yet. It's kind of fresh for me.
How about you, Ryan?
I haven't published anything on this yet. What we're seeing a very, very vigorous conversation about within medical education is engaging the large language model agents in helping the students interact more aggressively and more interactively with the content. And so instead of just them going and doing hundreds of practice questions from a QBank, that they have some sort of guidance or some sort of model that's providing them real-time feedback. And I've seen some interesting products and am involved with some of the feedback with those products as they're making their way through beta and looking to get into the commercial world. And so when a student answers a question correctly or wrongly, that the agent is then interacting with them to make sure that they explore that to its full potential, and that we keep that within any sort of accurate context without any sort of those AI hallucinations that tend to pop up.
I guess that's a question for all three of you. I mean, and maybe Ruben, if I could put you on the spot here. Sure. People who use generative AI refer to hallucinations. People who don't like generative AI refer to slop. But there's the question of AI making mistakes. I find when I ask for a biography of myself, ChatGPT insists that I went to school at MIT, which is flattering, but it's not the case. In terms of using AI in teaching with games, how can we handle this? How can we handle the hallucination problem?
Yeah, it's a great question. And again, it's a question of, for a start, where your hallucinations are appearing. One of the things I try to do when I'm working with people in AI is I teach them how to force an AI to hallucinate. And it's not that hard to do. You know exactly the weaknesses of each AI and so on. So for instance, I have a couple of biographies. I find that if you ask for biographies of mid-range Hollywood stars, you can, for some AIs, you have a near guarantee the chance that you're going to get a film they weren't in, or a life event that really never happened, and so on. So there are things like that that you can do just to get people a feel for it. But there's also questions of how you control for this. So concretely, in some of the work that we're discussing here, right, the medical, for instance, or some of the work I'm doing, for instance, with community, where I'm talking about resources that have to do with management of water and so on, where it's really important that the things be accurate. You can say, well, we start with a general AI, but we fine-tune it using a RAG, retrieval augmented generation type approach, using additional sources to keep it focused. So that's one of the first things you can do. You can just build out the data set to make sure that it has what you want, and you can focus it on that. And the second thing you can do is even in prompts, even if you don't have a RAG, is you can always ask the AI to check itself. And you can say, well, can you give me the sources for this information? Or please make sure that any statement you make is backed up by at least 2 sources that you can cite, and then you can check those sources. Now, that doesn't make for great gameplay by and large. I will admit that having, can I kill this dragon? And you can look it up in Tales of Dragons, blah, blah, blah. It's okay, that's not a great solution for that scenario. But it does work rather well if what you're trying to do is inform this, or if it's a process where the game itself is such that you are role-playing somebody whose role it would be to seek out this information, and you want that information to be confirmed, and so on. So does this eliminate the problem 100%? No. But it really allows you to keep it contained to the point where it gets to a point of what I would call the 80-20 solution, and I start comparing with, well, what would happen if you had human beings doing the same thing? And if you've ever worked with people in a library or people in any sort of assistant type position trying to get you information, you'll find that they're not 100% accurate either. So, right. you get it to the point where it works, basically.
Hallucinations are a big problem if you're using AI to do anything regarding storytelling. You read the little piece there about the Tyrannosaurus Rex finding the gemstone.
Yeah.
And that's silly. In one of the playthroughs of the students, it's silly because the students' purpose was to design an edu game that taught them about dinosaur evolution immediately prior to the asteroid impact. So the gemstone thing is that was a kind of story hallucination that it threw in. In the most ridiculous playthrough, the students had the dinosaurs migrate to an orbiting space station in order to avoid the imminent asteroid impact, and the game allowed them to do it. And it was, of course, that's a ridiculous hallucination, and it contradicts the purpose of the game itself. And so, if we did 2 or 3 different iterations, we might have designed those hallucinations out. But it was a problem for us reconciling with that capacity for AI to create narrative inconsistencies, via the hallucinations.
See, that's going to be a challenge here. Do you think that it sounds like this is not going to replace a game master or a GM, but this is something that might be an assistant to a GM?
The shorter the game, the more successful it was. The longer the kind of like interaction went on, the more the plot would unravel and it would forget things. So as of now, ChatGPT 3/4, there might be some threshold of logic or coherence that really, if the game world was very tightly defined, like the students who created the virtual house, it worked very well. But for the dinosaur world, that was the one that tended to go off the rails.
Oh, this is so interesting. In some ways, this is kind of the opposite of how we think about simulation, where, in many ways, the more data, the better, the richer the world. But here, the smaller the world, the more constrained, the better the experience.
For now, yeah.
Ruben, which generative AI application has the biggest context window these days?
Oh boy, probably Claude, I would say these
Mm-hmm.
days is my guess. I'd have to triple check that to be sure. I can't, because O1 keeps evolving and so on. I don't actually know what it's supposed to have right now. But if you ask me from my experience, I would give it to the latest version of Claude 3.5 Sonnet. That's where I've had the least problem with forgetting. And if not, then again, I find that you have to do a little bit of your own back work, so to speak, to keep track of things. And, it's this is the sort of thing that sometimes you do behind the scenes so that the players, don't know that something is doing a little bit of harvesting and sort of doing a little summary of the plot up to date that then gets fed back into the engine in the front end. And this is, I'll be honest with you, this is easier to do with the open source AIs than it is to do with the commercial ones. Not entirely. You can also do it if you have programming access to the commercial ones, but the open source AIs are a little bit more malleable in this regard, at least in my experience.
Oh, thank you. Let me just quickly explain. I tossed in two terms, which I don't think I explained. The context window refers roughly to how much memory of a given situation that generative AI can recall and keep in place. But the second was we're talking about rags, and Ruben, I'm going to put you on the spot again. If you could define a rag in this case,
Sure.
if you say a piece of cloth, I'm going to hit you.
Oh boy, you're tempting me so much, Brian, but no. No, rag is retrieval augmented generation. What you're doing there is you're basically saying, look, we trained a large language model on this huge body of works of different texts and so on. And then you say, well, here's a text that I really care about. Please answer questions or queries using this text as a primary source. Now, you can do this in different ways. You can say, use nothing but this and only use the large language model to interpret or parse the text. You can say, use your knowledge, but use this as the primary source. You can say, incorporate into many sources, or you can do different types of approaches. So for instance, I'll frequently do what I call a staged RAG. I'll start out with a general query. Then I'll say, well, now let me add this to the mix. Let me ask for a refinement. Now let me add some more data to the mix. Let me ask for a refinement. And again, you can do this very much in the foreground, or you can do it behind the scenes. But either way, what that allows you to do is it allows you to both avoid hallucinations, but also sometimes unearth things that you wouldn't have unearthed. And to me, that's part of the point, right? It's not just that I want the thing to just give me what I would have found out on my own. It's, can I give it a body of texts as these texts that go into the RAG and have it point out patterns I may not have noticed, or unearth things I wouldn't have otherwise unearthed. And again, there's degrees. You're going to find, if you do a quick search online, you're going to find huge guides with something like 32 patterns to just get you started on RAGs, and then the sky's the limit from there. But if somebody wants a quick place to begin, take a look at Google's Notebook LM. That's as dead easy a system to begin with on this, and that'll give you a first taste of what a RAG system can do. But that's just the beginning. Sky's the limit after that.
Well, I was thinking that I could use Notebook LM to replace the Bard in any party, in place, because I always want to murder bards, but you know, it would have that effect. Ruben, thank you for defining that. That's the best definition I've seen in a long time. In the chat, our good friend Brent Anders, again my guru for AI literacy, he says that he's been using AI in some interesting ways, including, he's got a link here which I'm not going to bring up right now, but on summaries, but also doing short role play and short simulations, 4 minutes tops, which is very, very interesting to hear. Friends, I'm going to just keep interrogating our poor panel. So let me make sure that you all get a chance to put your questions in. So again, at the very bottom of the screen, just click the raised hand button if you want to join us on stage. It does seem that you have to have facial hair to be on the stage today, but it's not completely true. We'll accept anybody. And also, if you want to type in a Q&A box question, you can do that. In fact, here's one right now. This is one from Ryan, who's trying to game out me threatening Ruben, which is very nice. And of course, we also have, you can please ask questions in the chat. while people are doing that, I'm wondering if Harry, if I could ask you another follow-up question. Um, how did Depauw support your gaming and teaching activity? You said you don't have TAs, but they gave. I'm inferring they gave you some latitude in designing the class. Was there any other way that the institution supported your experiments with teaching with gaming in this case?
Well, we don't have TAs, but we did create a kind of ad hoc TA via the independent study. So the student got half credit for helping me design this part of the class and help. He was in class while the students were writing the games, and he was in class when we debriefed on what happened and everything. So we have, I mean, Depauw strongly support student faculty research, and that may involve collaborating on a class or part of a class. So in that sense, they did support. And that's really all we needed. I didn't feel really confident in involving ChatGPT in an assignment without really understanding how ChatGPT worked. And Kevin helped me work through that. And so that was, so the short answer is Depauw supported it by supporting student faculty research. We worked together for a few weeks in the summer developing the part of the class. Kevin did some run-throughs of the assignment, which he used to write the guide for the class. So yeah, Depauw was supportive in that sense, and the student got a half credit out of it.
That's good. That's good. And also, I mean, this is something, Harry and I are going to be happy to dwell upon, which is undergraduate research experience. So, rather than being a graduate student working with a professor, you get an undergraduate who's doing actual primary research, which is, I think this is just a great thing in general, and Lawrence colleges are pretty solid about that. Thank you, Harry. That sounds terrific. We have another question coming in. I'm going to share this. Brent Anders asks, have you started work or research with AI game creation, where the AI is creating game visuals, full game world simulation in real time? This is a new area of AI development. I guess I'll put that to you, Ruben. Have you seen anybody doing this, or have you, in your mad science, mad wizard way, have you been doing that kind of work?
The thing about that is that so far there's the long and short story of it is there's a question of the interaction of the domains, right? And so sometimes you have use of the image for static, but on a dynamic way, it's still very much an open question in terms of how to get it to remain convincing, persuasive as a domain. And this gets into the whole question of what people accept, where will disbelief be suspended, etc. So the short answer is I have done some experiments. The long answer is I haven't seen anything yet that I would say is remarkably new or bring something new to the table.
Good question, and that's a very good answer, Ruben. I do this with my students. I have them use different tools, but especially my favorite is using Midjourney or using DALL-E within ChatGPT to create static images, especially assets for a computer game, but not live, not yet. We
did in my seminar. One of the labs we did after this one was the storyboard an open world RPG game using AI image generators, and we didn't actually make the game itself, but it was a professional simulation, a pitch, and they storyboarded parts of the world using. I think we used DALL-E 3, and we talked about things like visual consistency, stylistic consistency, and imagining the whole of a game world from different windows or parts that they created. So, but it wasn't interactive at all. It was just kind of like imagining the brush strokes of potentially a game world.
Oh, that's very nice. I haven't been able to get into Sora yet, because it keeps going offline. But I mean, it'd be interesting to see about once it becomes more stable, using that to generate a 10-second, 15-second clip of something as it happens during the game. And we have all kinds of comment going on in the chat. As usual, Tom Hames, glad to see you, Tom, who has a blog post about playfulness in AI, always good. Ruben answers a detailed question. And Lisa, as usual, weighs in with a nice pithy comment that play is important across the lifespan. Quite true, quite true. Well, while people are thinking about more questions, I'm wondering if the three of you have questions for each other. Because I have tons. I'm just going to keep jumping in, but I want to make sure that Ryan, you can ask Carrie, and Ruben, you can ask Carrie and Ryan questions. Did you have any for each other?
Yeah, actually, I have a question for you, Ryan, because this is a topic that is absolutely fascinating to me in terms of, physicians, future physicians, what that looks like. What do you find is, if you will, the overall response? In other words, do you find that if you did a sort of comparison, students that have been through this process versus students that have not, do you find that there's some aspects that they're able to perceive, understand, that the students who have not been through one of your experiences have reached? I'm very interested in hearing what you have to say about that.
Yeah, so one of the things that we get from our students is that they can go to lectures, they can go and do their small group sessions where they're in the room with a clinical medicine faculty, or they're working with any of their student-driven processes. But those days where they come in, they put on the white coats, they get to go in the room and they get to interact with the actor patients, or they get to interact with our medical mannequins. Some of them are quite sophisticated, where they simulate pulse and heart rate and breathing sounds. And so these give the students very, very accurate representations of the different diseases that we want to present to them. And on those days, they come out of that and they're glowing, they're beaming, they have that sense of they have accomplished something that we don't see from a normal day where they've sat in the lecture hall for 2 or 3 sessions. And really, that's one of those things to help them visualize where they're going to be and what it feels like to be doing this. Because part of any education process isn't just the accumulation of the content and the knowledge, but it's also the formation of a professional identity. And as far as assessment and feedback on these different types of events, especially when we're in the Sim Center, we record the entire event. And so after the event, during the debrief, we can go back and we can talk to the small groups about, why did you make that choice? When you interacted with the patient in that way, let's think about how the patient might have responded to the tone or the frame that you posed that question, and how you might frame that differently to be more culturally sensitive, how that might be more person focused, because we want to make sure that we're talking about the person first who happens to have a disease. And so this really gives us both the in the moment experience for the students to go in and interact, but then also the chance to revisit that from both the academic and the personal experiences that they take away from that. And so we can really get deep into that with both the individualized experience as well as the overall group dynamics that come out of that. And so these sometimes can be really, really transformative, especially when the students start feeling a little bit down on themselves. Med school is hard. They're working to get through as much as they can content-wise. Sometimes it feels like drinking from a fire hydrant. And so those are the days where we really see the students come alive sometimes. And so, yeah, I think the students who get to go through experiences like this are definitely going to benefit from it, especially when you're in a remote destination where you might not have access to a full teaching hospital. You can also think about how this might apply to other aspects of higher education. If you don't have access to certain industrial or commercial venues for students to go out into simulate and interact in job roles or to do internships, you can bring that to them to some degree with simulated experiences like this.
What a great question. And Brian, what a wonderful answer, revealing both your passion for this work, but also your incredible experience. Friends, we're at the last 10 minutes of our gathering, and I want to make sure that people have a chance to ask and answer questions. And we have one that takes us offline to the analog world. This is a great question from Amy Bowers, who says, I teach creative writing, and I'm working on the series of short tabletop role-playing games to generate ideas and explore literary elements. Is anyone else using more analog game playing in classrooms? Any suggestions? And I would just quickly, Amy, before my colleagues here can throw in, I just want to mention the wonderful Reacting to the Past game series. The title is pretty generic, but it is called Reacting to the Past. And these are role-playing games where people role-play a historical situation. We've hosted the creator of the games on the podcast, on our program in the past, and I can send you a link if you like. There's a lot of research on them. They're just really, really good. That's history, not literary, but I think you can work with us. But that's my quick answer. Ryan, Harry, Ruben, do you want to throw in some analog responses?
Yeah, I mean, you can use tabletop RPG games to, I think, brainstorm plot ideas, for stories that you want your students to write. I think it could be a playground for developing fiction. I'm not sure it would work for poetry, but you could. It's not that much different from workshopping a plot line. If you're in a creative writing workshop and you have 4 people talking about a kind of inciting incident, and then kind of moving from there with different choices, and you play through different scenarios and see which one is the most compelling plot, and then have a student write a piece of fiction based on roughly inspired by a playthrough. I think it could be a brainstorming tool for writing stories.
Good answer. Good answer. Well, I think you've gotten a lot to chew on with that one, Amy. And I'm happy to brainstorm more with that myself. If you want to follow up, please do. But we also have a question from our dear friend in Texas, Tom Hames, who asks a question that I think is really powerful. He asks, has to do with, if you will, the resistance to gaming. Do you often encounter resistance to playfulness in your classes? I often find students who are only interested in one game. How does this affect my grade? How do you get past this?
I can start, Brian. Working with med students, they can be extremely singularly focused. And really one of the nice things about, I know that the interest has kind of focused on the big simulations that we do, but even just the smaller tabletop style, we can pass out 20 different patients to 20 different small groups on a piece of paper and have them interact. And so really getting them out of the frame of what does this impact my grade and how is this going to shape me into the position is really one of those big things that we struggle with. And I think just getting that professional identity as part of their core mindset is a big part of getting them past the grades into the idea of being physicians, to actualizing their goals and the role that they'll play.
Well, thank you. This is a really good answer. I'm trying to bring on our mutual friend at the last minute here, Karl Kapp, who we've hosted before in the program. I'm not sure I'm able to get through right now. It looks like his signal might be a bit weak. Karl, can we at least do audio from you?
Yes. Can you guys hear me?
Hello. Yes, we can.
So I totally got the time wrong. Sorry about that.
It's okay. It's understandable.
Someone needs an Eastern Central Mountain Time game so I can figure out where and when I'm supposed to be where and when.
It'd be the world's worst multiplayer game, you know?
It would be, but
Karl, I'm just curious if I could put you on the spot. Do you have an answer for Tom's question? How do you deal with students who resist the idea of play because they're just wedded to getting in, getting the grade, and getting out?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So I do a number of different things. So I'm a big believer in kind of showing behind the curtain, like in Wizard of Oz. So
Yeah.
I'll spend a little bit of time explaining why it is a game-based approach and why we are using playfulness in the classroom to just let them know that that's an important element. So, for example, it's a little bit easier for me. I teach instructional design students who are designing instruction. So I'm like, okay, well, let's step back. But even the comment about medical school, one of the biggest complaints is doctors don't have bedside manner. And what is bedside manner? It's a little bit of playfulness. So talking about why that's important, how it connects to people, how it connects one person to another person, I think all of that is important to talk about. So it's not just an instructional technique that we're using, it's also a social technique that we're using. And playfulness is one of the most universal social aspects that we humans have. And sometimes just explaining that can be helpful.
Thank you. I'm so glad we saw you. Friends, and that we could host you. We are at the end of the hour. And this makes me sad because we have, among other things, a lot of great comments and observations in the chat. There are links. Some people are talking about games they've taught in different situations with resources for that. We've had really good observations and thoughts. Lisa mentions the quiz game Kahoot, which people tend to respond to pretty well. I'll second that motion. And Carrie Pinnell has been asking really good questions, especially for economic classes. So, friends, in the chat, just let me know. I would love to extract this and post this to my blog. If you don't mind, just please let me know in the chat. Let me just quickly go around and ask each of the four of you. How can we keep up with your work and follow up with all of your gaming work? Let's start with you, Harry. How can we follow? I mean, it sounds like you're just teaching the best classes in the liberal arts world. How do we keep up with you?
Email is fine. I'm kind of a Sasquatch with social media, but if you want to talk, just reach out directly. I'm happy to continue.
Oh, great. If you don't mind, if we're going to do another session like this in 2025, and I'll have to bring you back.
Sure. Thanks.
How about you, Ryan? How do we keep up with your professor as GM?
Yeah, so you can always find me on LinkedIn. Email is fantastic. About 2 years ago, I made the decision for my mental health that social media wasn't something that was working well for me. And so I've gone analog in some ways, but email is definitely great. LinkedIn is another good way to stay in touch.
Oh, good. And we shared LinkedIn for folks there too. Ruben, is LinkedIn the best way to keep up with you?
Yeah, these days LinkedIn is, I think, the best way. Once upon a time, it would have been Twitter, but these days LinkedIn is more of a good hub for me. And I'm looking at some other possibilities for 2025, but LinkedIn is a very good place for now.
All right, understood. And Karl, thank you again for coming. How about you? How can we? Is your YouTube channel the best place?
Send me watches. Send me clocks. Yeah, my main hub would be LinkedIn. That's where a lot of my action. I have a newsletter there. I have fairly frequent interactions. So that's probably the best place to reach me. I've got some resources on YouTube, that are available. But if you have a direct question or something, let me know that this is where we connected. This would be helpful because I'm sure I totally understand I get some weird LinkedIn requests. So
I bet. But
letting me know something, if I give everybody 15 minutes of my time, I would.
I'll put in a plug for Karl's LinkedIn work and his videos, which are just fascinating. Again, Karl, Harry, Ryan, Ruben, thank you so much for joining us. This has been awful good. And if I don't get to talk to you all live, have a good holiday session. But that doesn't mean go away, everybody. I've got to just wrap things up by putting out a few notes. If you want to keep talking about this, we can keep talking about this on the socials. We can leave Ryan behind in the dust, but we can talk about this on. Here's my handle on Twitter, my handle on Mastodon, Threads, and Blue Sky. If you want to take a look into our previous sessions talking about gaming, just go to our archive, tinyurl.com/FDF archive. If you'd like to look ahead, our sessions covering everything from reforming grading to World Futures Day to growth mindset, student mental health, campuses, mental health, and financial health, just go to the forum website, forum.futureofeducation.us. Thank you again for being with us. This has been a great conversation. I've really appreciated this. I hope everyone takes a lot away with this. Please keep in touch, and we'll see you next time online. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.